under a crimson moon that bathed the land in an eerie glow. The jagged peaks of Mount Revenant rose like jagged teeth from the earth. At its pinnacle stood a castle of obsidian and bone, its spires piercing the heavens like a cursed monument to eternity. This was Dracula's domain, a realm steeped in shadows where mortal souls dared not wander. Tonight, the air crackled with an unnatural energy, and the scent of decay mingled with a faint trace of ozone. Inside the grand hall of the castle, Count Dracula prepared for an unholy ritual. Dracula, his pale face etched with centuries of malice, moved with deliberate purpose. His crimson-lined cape swept the floor as he approached an altar draped in ancient, blood-stained linens. Carved into the surface were sigils of forgotten gods, their meanings lost to time, but their power undeniable. His hands, unerringly steady for a creature cursed to eternal unrest, traced the runes as he whispered incantations in a tongue older than the mountains themselves. A chalice filled with the blood of his enemies sat at the altar's center, its surface swirling unnaturally. This was no ordinary blood. It was the key to summoning the ally he so desperately sought. Dracula's red eyes flickered toward the shadows as if sensing a presence. He knew the risks of invoking such ancient forces. His kingdom teetered on the brink of ruin, plagued by insurrection and hunted by a cabal of zealots wielding sacred weapons. Though his powers were vast, they were not limitless. He needed a weapon, a creation that could rival death itself. And so, he had turned to a name whispered in fear and awe, Victor Frankenstein. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in ragged black, his gaunt face a map of sleepless nights and unending torment. Victor Frankenstein, a man of science turned master of unholy creation, was no stranger to the castle's darkness. His mind, once a beacon of human ingenuity, had become a labyrinth of obsession and regret. Yet tonight it held a singular focus, the pact with Dracula. "I trust you understand the magnitude of what we are about to do," Dracula said, his voice like velvet laced with steel. Victor's lip curled in a humorless smirk. "Do not mistake my desperation for ignorance, Count. You seek a beast. I bring you one. But do not think you can control what I have wrought." Dracula's gaze narrowed. The air between the two men was thick with unspoken mistrust. Yet, their goals aligned for now. Victor stepped forward, revealing a massive figure trailing behind him. It was the creature, a towering amalgamation of stolen flesh and forbidden ambition. Its hulking frame moved with a grace that belied its monstrous appearance, and its yellow eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and anger. Every step it took seemed to echo with the weight of its cursed existence. The creature's voice, deep and resonant, broke the silence. "What new torment have you brought me to, Victor?" "You will speak when spoken to," Victor snapped, though his tone wavered. Even he could not deny the creature's growing autonomy. Dracula regarded the monstrous being with a mixture of curiosity and approval. "Magnificent," he murmured. "You've outdone yourself, Frankenstein. But can it follow commands? Will it kneel when ordered?" The creature growled low, the sound reverberating through the chamber. "I kneel to no man nor monster." Dracula's smile was thin and sharp. "We shall see." The ritual began. Victor positioned the creature in the center of a circle of runes etched into the cold stone floor. Candles flickered as Dracula intoned the ancient words, their resonance vibrating through the castle walls. The chalice of blood levitated, its contents spiraling upward in defiance of gravity. The air grew dense, charged with a power that seemed to blur the line between the mortal and the divine. The creature stood motionless, its massive hands clenched into fists. Though it loathed Victor, it had no desire to see the world burn under Dracula's tyranny. Yet, as the ritual reached its zenith, it felt the pull of an ancient force binding it to this cursed fate. A blinding light erupted from the circle, illuminating the chamber in a ghastly brilliance. When it subsided, a strange silence enveloped the room. The sigils on the floor now glowed faintly, pulsating like a heartbeat. Dracula stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with triumph. The ritual had succeeded, but at what cost? Victor, pale and trembling, stared at the altar. "What have we unleashed?" Dracula turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Not what, Frankenstein. Who? Together, we will reclaim this cursed world." The creature, still standing in the circle, looked down at its hands as if expecting to see chains. Yet none were visible. "If I am to serve," it said, its voice a low rumble, "then I demand answers. What is it you truly seek, Count?" Dracula's grin widened, revealing his fangs. "Eternity, and those who stand in my way will know suffering beyond death." Victor clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had created a monster once, but now he wondered if he had aided in creating a force far worse. The uneasy alliance had begun, and each of them knew that betrayal was not a matter of if, but when. The uneasy pact between Dracula and Victor Frankenstein solidified under the ominous glow of the crimson moon. Victor spent his days and nights in the castle's dimly lit laboratory, an unsettling mix of his scientific obsession and Dracula's arcane rituals, transforming the space into a site of forbidden experimentation. The creature remained a brooding presence, its mistrust simmering beneath its monstrous exterior, as it carried out its tasks in silence. For all involved, this partnership was less a collaboration and more a ticking time bomb. Dracula's need was urgent. Hunters, fanatical and relentless, closed in on his stronghold. Their silver weapons and holy relics had grown increasingly potent, and their numbers swelled with each passing day. Dracula sought not just a servant, but an army. And Frankenstein, fueled by desperation and a craving to prove the worth of his intellect, had no choice but to comply. Victor's work began with the careful selection of corpses. Under Dracula's command, dark-winged servants scoured battlefields and graveyards for the freshest and strongest remains. Victor's mind churned with ideas, his hands rarely still. With every stitch and every burst of electrical life he bestowed, he felt both pride and dread. He was creating something far beyond his original ambitions, a legion of beings meant to obey Dracula's will. But the scientist's pride made him wonder, could this army be turned against its master? One evening, Victor confronted Dracula in the grand hall. The firelight flickered against the obsidian walls, casting long, twisting shadows. The Count stood near a towering window, gazing out at the storm brewing on the horizon. "I have fulfilled my part of the bargain," Victor said, his voice firm but tinged with caution. "But this army you demand, tell me, what will you do once they are unleashed?" Dracula turned, his red eyes gleaming. "What does it matter, Frankenstein? Do you wish to claim moral high ground after creating horrors that defy nature itself? My purpose is simple: domination. Those who dare challenge me will kneel, or they will perish." Victor's lips thinned, but he said nothing. Inside, a storm raged. He knew Dracula's ambitions were far-reaching and merciless, and aiding him would only tighten the noose around humanity. But he also knew Dracula's power made defiance a deadly gamble. He decided he needed leverage. The creature, ever watchful, began piecing together the tension between its two masters. It spent hours in silent contemplation, the memories of its own creation and subsequent abandonment fueling its disdain for Victor. Yet it despised Dracula's tyranny even more. It knew it was not merely a pawn. It was a symbol of the blurred lines between life and death, creation and destruction. The creature began to devise a plan of its own, a way to seize freedom and end the twisted cycle of servitude. Late one night, as Victor worked feverishly in the laboratory, the creature approached him. Its massive frame cast a shadow that seemed to swallow the room. Victor looked up, startled but composed. "You've built an army for the vampire," the creature said, its deep voice reverberating through the stone walls. "But what stops him from turning his wrath on you once his enemies are vanquished?" Victor paused, his hands frozen mid-motion. He didn't respond immediately, but the creature's words struck a chord. "I know his power," Victor finally said, his voice a low murmur. "And I know he will not honor our pact." But what choice do I have? The creature stepped closer, its yellow eyes burning with intensity. You have me. I am stronger than any of your creations. Together, we can stop him. Victor hesitated. The thought of betraying Dracula filled him with dread, yet the creature's logic was undeniable. Dracula's ambitions would not end with conquering his enemies. He would enslave or destroy all who stood in his way, including Victor. What is it you propose? Victor asked cautiously. Your creations, the creature replied. You built them. You can control them. We turn them against the Count before he has a chance to unleash them. Victor leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The creature's plan was bold, dangerous, and uncertain, but it was also the only hope of survival. The days that followed were tense and filled with subterfuge. Victor worked tirelessly, implanting hidden failsafes in his creations while feigning loyalty to Dracula. The creature, meanwhile, began testing its strength against the castle's defenses, studying every weakness and entry point. Both knew that time was running out. The hunter's approach grew ever closer, and Dracula's demands for progress became more insistent. Dracula, however, was not blind to the growing unrest. Though Victor's servitude seemed genuine, and the creature appeared to follow orders begrudgingly, the Count's centuries of survival had taught him to trust no one. He began to lay traps of his own, quietly observing the two for any signs of betrayal. The breaking point came during a storm-laden night. Lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the castle in blinding flashes. Dracula summoned Victor and the creature to the throne room. The Count's red eyes bore into them, and his voice carried the weight of thunder. I smell treachery, Dracula hissed. Do not mistake my patience for ignorance. Speak now, and I may grant you a merciful end. Victor's heart pounded, but he steadied his breathing. Treachery? I have given you everything you asked for, Count. My loyalty is unwavering. Dracula's smile was razor-thin. Lies, he said simply. With a flick of his wrist, the chamber doors slammed shut, and his dark power filled the room like a suffocating fog. Perhaps I should remind you both why I am the master here. Before Dracula could strike, the creature moved. With a feral roar, it lunged at the Count, its massive fists swinging with unparalleled force. The two collided in a violent clash, their strength shaking the very foundations of the castle. Victor, seizing the moment, activated the fail-safes within his creations. From the shadows, the grotesque army of stitched flesh emerged, their glowing eyes fixed on Dracula. The battle was chaos incarnate. The creature fought Dracula with a ferocity born of years of suffering and rage. Meanwhile, Victor's creations swarmed the Count, their raw power overwhelming even his dark magic. But Dracula was no ordinary foe. His centuries of experience and supernatural abilities made him a formidable opponent. Amid the chaos, Victor realized the truth. This fight was not about victory or survival. It was about breaking free from the chains of their shared damnation. The creature fought not just for its own freedom, but for the chance to end the cycle of exploitation that had defined its existence. Victor, too, saw this as a chance for redemption, to undo the horrors he had unleashed upon the world. As the battle raged, the question loomed. Would their combined strength be enough to defeat Dracula, or had they underestimated the true extent of his power? The answer would come at a price none of them were prepared to pay. The battle in the grand hall of Dracula's castle had descended into chaos. The storm outside mirrored the fury within, with lightning strikes illuminating the grim melee. The creature fought with unparalleled savagery, each blow landing with the force of its pent-up anger and pain. Victor's stitched-together creations swarmed Dracula, their malformed bodies a testament to his scientific hubris. But the Count was no ordinary opponent. His supernatural strength and centuries of dark cunning made him a force that even this combined effort struggled to match. Dracula's form seemed to blur as he moved, his strikes faster than mortal eyes could follow. He hurled one of Victor's creatures across the room with ease, its body shattering against a stone pillar. The creature roared and charged again, unrelenting in its assault. For every strike the Count evaded, the creature adapted, learning and countering. Victor stood back, desperately working a set of controls hidden within the folds of his coat, attempting to command his creations to better coordination. "You think you can defy me?" Dracula's voice boomed, carrying an almost palpable weight. His gaze flicked to Victor. "And you, Frankenstein, your arrogance will be your undoing." Victor's heart raced, but he refused to back down. "You are not invincible," he said, forcing the words through his fear. "You have underestimated us." Dracula laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You believe yourself my equal? I am older than your science, stronger than your greatest creation." The creature took advantage of Dracula's distraction, delivering a blow that sent the Count staggering. Victor's army closed in, their grotesque forms moving with eerie synchronization. But Dracula raised a hand, and shadows erupted from the floor, tendrils of darkness coiling around his attackers and flinging them aside like broken toys. The creature pushed forward, undeterred. Its eyes burned with determination, the embodiment of years of anguish and a desperate yearning for liberation. "You are no god, Dracula," it growled, its voice deep and resonant. "You are a parasite, feeding on fear and weakness." Dracula snarled, his fangs bared, and surged toward the creature. The two clashed in a feral display of brute strength and unyielding resolve. Victor watched, his mind racing. He knew the creature alone could not overpower Dracula, not without a final, decisive act. With trembling hands, Victor activated the last failsafe embedded in his creations. A low hum filled the air as the reanimated army stiffened, their movements growing deliberate and synchronized. They began to circle Dracula and the creature, their glowing eyes locking onto the Count. Dracula sensed the shift and turned his attention to Victor. "You dare to defy me with your abominations? I should have torn you apart from the beginning." Victor took a step back, but stood his ground. "You wanted an army. Now face it." The creatures surged forward, their collective weight forcing Dracula to redirect his focus. The Count lashed out, his supernatural speed and strength cutting through their ranks. But for every one he destroyed, two more took its place. The creature joined the fray, striking with renewed vigor, its blows landing harder as Dracula's defenses began to falter. Victor saw his opportunity. He retrieved a vial from his coat, a concoction of alchemical reagents and forbidden substances designed as a last resort. It was not made to kill Dracula, for Victor doubted such a thing was possible, but to weaken him enough for the final strike. With trembling hands, he hurled the vial at Dracula. The glass shattered against the Count's chest, releasing a searing burst of light and smoke. Dracula screamed, his form writhing as the alchemical brew burned through his defenses. The shadows that coiled around him dissipated, and for the first time, the mighty vampire seemed vulnerable. The creature seized a moment. With a guttural roar, it grabbed Dracula, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the stone floor with earth-shaking force. The impact echoed through the castle, cracks spidering out from the point of collision. "You are finished," the creature growled, its voice trembling with a mix of triumph and fury. "Your reign ends here." Dracula, bloodied but defiant, looked up at the creature, his crimson eyes blazing with hatred. "You think this changes anything? You are still a creation, a shadow of life. You will never be free." The creature hesitated, the words striking a chord of doubt. Victor, seeing the hesitation, shouted, "Don't listen to him. You are more than what he or I made you. End this." The creature's grip tightened, and with a final surge of strength, it drove its fist into Dracula's chest. The Count's body convulsed, his crimson eyes dimming as his power began to wane. The storm outside seemed to quiet, the oppressive weight of Dracula's presence lifting from the air. As Dracula's body crumbled into ash, the creature stood over the remains, its massive frame heaving with exertion. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth. Victor approached cautiously, his face pale but resolute. "It's done," Victor said, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature turned to him, its yellow eyes filled with something Victor could not quite place. Relief, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. "No," it said, its voice steady. "It's not done. Not yet." Victor frowned. "What do you mean?" The creature gestured to the laboratory and the creations that still lingered, their purpose fulfilled but their existence unresolved. "We must finish what you started. These abominations, your work, they must be undone." Victor looked at the remnants of his army, their lifeless gazes reflecting the torment of their existence. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the creature's words. Together, they dismantled the laboratory, deactivating the creations one by one. As dawn broke, the castle stood quiet and empty, its dark legacy erased. Victor and the creature stood at the edge of the forest, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the trees. "What will you do now?" Victor asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The creature looked out at the horizon, its expression unreadable. "I will find my own path," it said, "away from men like you, away from darkness." Victor watched as the creature disappeared into the wilderness, its massive form fading into the distance. For the first time in years, Victor felt a strange sense of peace, tempered by the knowledge of his sins but buoyed by the hope that, perhaps, redemption was possible.